Representative OGrady. I'd like to ask Jerry Elmer and Mr. O'Demway from RIPTA to come forward. Good afternoon, Representative. Welcome. Gentlemen, welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Appreciate the opportunity to speak on this bill today. As you all recall, last year this committee endorsed or heard a bill that we referred to as the Transportation Investment and Debt Reduction Act of 2011. And a version of that bill made it into last year's budget and was adopted. And I think we can take some satisfaction, perhaps some pride in the fact that what that bill did was move the state away from its unsustainable reliance on bonding to provide a match for the federal transportation dollars that come into the state to support the activities of DOT. We saw over the last several years sort of a series of slides presented by DOT in presentations to this committee and others that showed this tremendous reliance on debt service as part of their budget and an increasing use of our gas tax yield to pay down debt service. The budget article that came out of this committee and was passed on the floor last year raised automobile registration fees in addition to licensing fees, dedicated those funds into a transportation trust fund, which was then dedicated to move the state steadily away from its reliance on long-term borrowing, long-term debt obligations to match our federal dollars. But there was an important element of that bill as proposed to this committee that was left out of the budget article, and it was the element that recognized that our transportation system is more than roads. It is, in fact, a system that includes buses, includes perhaps commuter rail, and includes other modes of transportation besides simply the roads that we drive on. So the bill that I'm submitting this year takes a look at that issue again. And as the chairman pointed out, what it would do is three things. First of all, it would keep, and I want to be clear about this, it keeps the obligation in place for any new monies raised to first go towards moving us away from our reliance on bonding to provide the match for the federal monies. So that is unchanged. But what is changed is it brings RIPTA back into the picture. And so for the Transportation Trust Fund that's been set up, it establishes a 65%, 35% split so that DOT continues to receive 65% of all monies that go into the Transportation Trust Fund. However, RIPTA is cut in again at a 35% level. As the chairman mentioned, it transfers from the general fund the vehicle registration fees and the licensing fees over to this Transportation Trust Fund, not just the increment as a result of last year's increases, but the entire amounts. And it does so in 20% increments over a 5-year period, which results in a net increase to both DOT and certainly to RIPTA. One of the accomplishments of last year's bill is that it again moved us away from this reliance on long-term borrowing. But what it did not do is it did not address what was presented to us as a $2.8 billion unfunded transportation liability. In other words, there is a $280 million a year shortfall in the monies that DOT receives for maintenance of our roads and bridges a year, $280 million a year over the next 10 years. That would be required simply to bring our roads and bridges up to a safe and passable level. I think that we can all agree that this state can ill afford to see a repeat of what we saw in Pawtucket over the last 10 years, where a major bridge on Route 95 is suddenly weight restricted, causing net hundreds of miles of detours to all the truck and transit traffic that goes through this state on the New York to Boston corridor. We don't want to see that again. And so the extra money that goes into the Transportation Trust Fund and distributed again to DOT in addition to RIPTA would really help us avert another Pawtucket Bridge situation, whether it be at the viaduct in Providence or whether it be elsewhere in this state. I think a previous speaker mentioned that we really need to focus on keeping RIPTA afloat. Last summer, we all, or many of us anyways, went around the state and participated in the service cut hearings that RIPTA held. And one thing that became very clear to me is that RIPTA is a key component to the mobility of our disabled community. And the RIDE program is established as an offshoot of the RIPTA service routes. And so if you are living within close proximity to a RIPTA bus route, you are able to take advantage of the RIDE program as a result of that proximity. If bus routes are eliminated, you no longer have, and the route that you live in proximity to is eliminated, then you no longer have the opportunity to tap into the RIDE program. And that would severely limit the mobility of some of our most disadvantaged residents, from a transportation perspective. So there are others here that can certainly speak to the details of this bill, but I think that what this does is it complements and completes the efforts that we took last year, the steps that we took last year. Again, the bill's title last year was the Transportation Investment and Deficit and Debt Reduction Act of 2011. I would argue that that bill was strong on the debt reduction aspect, but not quite strong enough on the transportation investment aspect. And this bill seeks to address that shortfall, that shortcoming. And again, there are others here that can speak to its effects.
Thank you, Representative.
Thank
Any
you.
questions for Representative OGrady? Thank you. Mr. Elmer, good afternoon and welcome.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. My name is Jerry Elmer. I'm a staff attorney at Conservation Law